Maize, the backbone of the Mexican tortilla. I started by visiting Enchiladas, which is a family-owned Mexican restaurant in my hometown of Brooksville, Florida. I ordered authentic Mexican street tacos and of course got them with corn tortillas. In the United States, a lot of people default to flour tortillas, but the traditional original style is corn, and that's what gives this dish its real flavor and identity. For the rest of this presentation, I'm focusing on the production and importance of traditional corn, or also known as maize, tortillas. I'll be covering the history behind maize, the agricultural economy that supports it, how geography and socioeconomic conditions shape its use, the policies that impact maize farmers, and finally the cultural significance of the corn tortilla and how it compares to other regions. Mexico produces a massive amount of maize every year, and most of what matters for tortillas is white corn. According to USDA, Mexico produced about 27.7 million metric tons of maize in 2017, and almost 80% of that was white corn, which is the type used for tortillas. Production has been slowly increasing over time because of better seed varieties and more mechanization. The country still relies heavily on millions of small and mid-sized farms, and output depends on climate conditions that shift between drought, humidity, and tropical storms. The big point is that Mexico grows a lot, but it also faces challenges that affect tortilla production, prices, and access. Corn has been tied to Mexico since the beginning. Mexican maize was domesticated thousands of years ago, and the country still holds most of the world's maize races and biodiversity. Research published on maize shows how deep this genetic diversity runs and how it shaped the tortilla as a staple food. Indigenous groups created tortillas long before Europeans showed up, using the process of nixtamalization. Nixtamalization is a traditional Mesoamerican process of cooking dried corn in an alkaline solution, often lime water, to make it softer, more digestible, and more nutritious. Studies describe tortillas as daily, inexpensive food for Mexican households, showing how central they've always been. The entire identity of the tortilla traces back to these early developments in maize diversity in indigenous food systems. Maize sits at the center of Mexico's agricultural economy, especially white maize for tortillas. USDA data shows consistent growth and production driven by improvements in seed and farming practices, but the system is still a mix of smallholders and larger commercial regions. Mexico's maize sector is affected by yield variation, climate pressures, and market conditions. On top of that, the country grows maize across very different regions, from irrigated northern states to rain-fed indigenous areas in central and southern Mexico. This structure shapes everything from farmer income to tortilla availability and price. Where maize is grown in Mexico and who grows it matters. Studies on maize shows how different varieties are adapted to a huge range of climates, from arid zones to humid tropical regions. Those location differences influence what kind of corn ends up in tortillas. Socioeconomic factors shape the picture too. Rural households often rely on native maize varieties and traditional tortilla production, while urban areas depend more on industrial masa harina. Because tortillas are a daily staple and cheap calorie source, any changes in maize prices or yields disproportionately hit lower income groups. Geography and income are directly tied to how this ingredient is produced and consumed. Mexico's maize sector has been shaped heavily by policy decisions. Research on maize policy shows how agreements like NAFTA changed the market by increasing exposure to imported corn and limiting how much protection small farmers had. Policy debates focus on how to support maize farmers while protecting biodiversity, since native maize races are such a central part to the country's agriculture and culture. Different policies and programs have tried to stabilize this sector, but the main challenge has been balancing economic efficiency with preserving the traditional maize systems that make tortillas what they are. Corn tortillas aren't just food in Mexico, they're a cultural anchor. Research describes tortillas as a daily, essential, low-cost part of Mexican life. The diversity of maize races contributes directly to regional tortilla differences, from color to texture to flavor. This cultural connection stands out when you compare Mexico to other regions. Central American countries use corn in their own ways, but the tortilla's identity is strongest in Mexico because of its deep indigenous roots. Meanwhile, in the United States, often relies on industrial yellow corn or flour tortillas, which doesn't carry the same cultural weight. The tortilla reflects Mexico's history, agriculture, and identity all at once. For this part, I wanted to show how traditional corn tortillas are actually made, and I followed a guide that uses real Mexican masa harina brand like Meseca. The process is simple, but way more authentic. You mix the masa harina with warm water until the dough feels soft and smooth. Lay it to rest so it hydrates, then roll it into small balls. Each one gets pressed between plastic and a tortilla press until it's thin and round. From there, it just cooks on a hot, dry skillet for less than a minute per side. If it puffs, you did it right. And once they're done, you keep them wrapped so they stay warm and flexible. It's a basic process, but using the actual Mexican masa harina is what makes flavor and texture real.